All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Community Conversations. Welcome back for our winter series entitled Get the Message. We're going to be talking about communication and all sorts of different realms of communication this quarter, from technology to history to psychology to all sorts of stuff. So I'm very excited to bring in a lot of voices to talk about this topic each Thursday at noon for the rest of winter quarter. So we're starting this week with Stefanie Gilberti, and we're going to go on from there. Next week, we have David Rosie, who's going to be presenting Alexa, Is That You? A look at technology and communication. And a reminder for our Humanities 106 students, your papers are going to be due on Tuesdays at noon. So you watch the presentation on Thursday, and then Tuesday is when your papers will be due. For those of you who aren't in Humanities 106, just sit back and enjoy the show. I will be moderating the question and answer tab down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So if you do have a question, feel free to put it in the chat there, and I will present it to our speaker at the end of the session if we have time. Thank you very much. And remember, we also record these events. We will post them on the website, and they go up on the LCC YouTube channel, which means they also get captioned. So if you have any friends who need captioning to enjoy the presentations, that would be the best bet for them. So now it's time for me to introduce our speaker, and I'm very glad to finally get her on board and get her doing the community conversations. I've had my eye on you for a while. Stefanie Gilberti has been with LCC since 2008. She spent the first 5 years as an adjunct faculty member, but was hired on full-time tenure track in 2013 and received tenure in 2016. She teaches public speaking, interpersonal communication, intercultural communication, and small group communication courses, both online and under normal circumstances in the classroom. She earned a bachelor's degree majoring in both mass and speech communication from North Dakota State University, and a master's degree in speech communication from Colorado State University, with a focus on rhetoric and persuasion. And despite her educational focus on rhetoric, her true passion is interpersonal communications and relationships. So please welcome Stefanie Gilberti.
Thank you, Courtney. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the introduction, and I'm so excited. This is my first community conversation, and yes, I agree with Courtney. It is about time that I get on board and do this, and what a fabulous type of message to be sharing, like get the message. And I was looking at some of the speakers that are going to be giving presentations, and I'm so excited because we're going to really create a foundation. I titled this Fundamentals for Successful Communication because you're going to be, from other speakers, hearing about all these different facets of communication in so many fields. And really, you know, communication is in everything. It's everywhere. It's nonstop. It's all around us. We're doing it constantly. So it's going to be really fun to kind of get those different viewpoints from some different fields. So I'm going to start by hopefully not embarrassing her too much, but I happen to know that it is our fearless leader, the facilitator and teacher of this class. It's Courtney's birthday today. Happy birthday. Heartfelt happy birthday to Courtney. She is just constantly helping others and putting this all together, which I know is no easy feat. So a big heartfelt happy birthday, Courtney. And those cupcakes look delicious. I wish that we were in person because I would have brought like some cupcakes or something, because it's not even my birthday. And I'm like, where's my cupcake? So here we go. Okay, so really quick preview. I've kind of chunked this off into 4 different sections. We're going to be defining some stuff just so we're all kind of working off of the same understanding. We're going to be talking about the process of communication, kind of what that looks like and the different components. We're going to talk about communication meeting our needs, because it really meets all of our needs. And I might be a little biased there, but it really does. And then we're also going to be talking about strategies for success in challenging times, which we are facing, challenging times we have been facing for quite some time now. It's really important to have some strategies for successful communication. So let's start with creating our foundation with some definitions here, and hopefully everyone can see this okay. So the definition of communication is essentially the process by which information is exchanged between individuals. And when it comes to communication, you really can kind of ask every person a little bit, what their definition of communication is, and they're all going to give you a different answer. They're going to give you a different kind of perspective, but really it'll probably be pretty similar. It's so many. I put this little word jumble down here because it's really all of these things and so much more. So when you think about the process of communication, it's just the exchange of information, ideas between individuals. So that's our definition that we're working off of. I also wanted to define nonverbal communication because everything outside of language is considered nonverbal communication. So messages conveyed by non-linguistic means, really all that means is you have this kind of little bubble of language, which is linguistics, and then everything else that communicates that exists outside of that little bubble of language is nonverbal. And so some theorists actually say that the amount of meaning that we derive from communication is mostly nonverbal. The percentages, it's a pretty big range, but in typical conversations, the meaning derived from nonverbal communication is going to be somewhere between 65% up to, it could even be up to 95% of meaning is derived from nonverbal communication. So that's pretty powerful when we think about how much of our communication is not actually spoken word. So I did put this little graphic in here, and I've got a couple other ones I want to show you too. But so appearance, things like your clothing, physical attractiveness, things like your hair, and for whoever wears makeup, things like that are all part of nonverbal. And then gestures, facial expressions, posture, eye contact, those are all combined under a field that we call kinesics. And kinesics is the study of body movement. So if you've ever heard of like kinesiology, kind of the study of how the body moves, it's kind of derived from that. So kinesics is, our hand movements, it's our facial expressions, it's, our posture and our stance and how we kind of move around. And then of course, eye contact, which culturally is very significant. And then we have paralinguistics or paralanguage, usually kind of interchangeable. And this one throws people sometimes because paralanguage is essentially still verbal in a way. It's like with your voice, but it's not linguistic. So things like your tone and pitch, things like volume or your pauses, even, things like sarcasm. So if you think of saying something sarcastically, meaning of sarcasm isn't derived really from the words. It's the tone that you put with the words that becomes the meaning behind it, because there's a big difference when you say, like a legitimate, heartfelt good job versus good job. It totally changes the meaning of the words because you're putting that different tone with it. And I don't know about you, but I am never sarcastic. So I've studied it though. So a couple other ones that are not included on this that I think are incredibly important, especially considering what we're going through right now, things like haptics. So haptics is the study of touch. Touch is essential for life. It's essential. It's essential for connection. It really is so incredibly important for us. And yet right now we're being deprived. And in the United States, we're already a little bit of a touch deprived culture. It's not as culturally significant for us to people have some pretty big space bubbles in the United States, a lot, unless it's like an intimate, close person in your life. We have some pretty big space bubbles. But haptics is incredibly important. So when we now are already kind of in the US, a touch deprived culture, and then you add on COVID where everyone's like, don't touch anything, don't touch anyone, and wash your hands and all this stuff. It's kind of creating, an interesting dynamic because we really do need it. So I guess the important thing would be to seek out that touch from, wherever is safe and appropriate at this time to kind of fulfill that need. Another one that's incredibly important right now that is still part of we're still in nonverbal communication, believe it or not, is proxemics. Proxemics is about distance and territoriality in space. So I put my good old social distancing up here because we communicate through space. Typically, again, under normal circumstances, we don't always like people hovering around us or standing really close to us. But now it's become kind of a rule in a way, or a regulation in a lot of areas, that we need to have that space. And I'm sure some people are like totally on board, and other people are probably like, oh, I feel so far away from you, depending on the type of relationship, the nature of your relationship. But it's creating, again, some challenges, but it also communicates. Right now, when you socially distance from someone, you're essentially, I think in a way you're saying to them, I respect you, I respect your health, I respect my health, and I'm going to follow these rules because I believe it to be the right thing to do. So you could be, or you could just be, doing it because you have to. Either way, you're communicating something. Okay. Territoriality is about spaces. We get very territorial over our space. So, if you have a desk, or maybe even your car or your bedroom or something like that, and it's like, this is my space, and you have it set up just the way you like it, and you don't really like other people moving stuff around. It's by nature. That's about proxemics. So another fun nonverbal communication element. Couple more really quick. Physical environment is also nonverbal. So setting and things like architecture and interior design. And I have to be honest, I literally Googled inviting places, and this is one of the images that popped up. And you can see at the bottom there, I have a little source for it, but it's called Cafe Appalachia in South Charleston, West Virginia. And it's a cute little coffee shop in an old church. They put it in an old church. And I just looked at the picture and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cute. I want to go there. And that to me shows communication in spaces. Because if you walk into a space, you're like, wow, I feel so good here. I feel welcomed. I feel homey. If we want to, some people want to create those inviting spaces, and architecture and interior design and colors and lighting and all that stuff is just one way, or a few ways to do that. So I really like how the physical environments communicate. I did try to feng shui my house once. It did not go well. People forget about time. Time communicates, and we communicate about time too. If you've ever heard the expression, time is money, time is very powerful. And in our culture, the majority of people in our culture in the United States, we are very time oriented. It's very scheduled. And I guess maybe not as much anymore, but before, you had an alarm clock and you woke up when your alarm went off, and you had maybe your schedule, and you go to class and you're expected to be to class on time, or you're expected to be to work on time. And the nature of time has definitely changed with the COVID-19 pandemic. But at the same time, it does still communicate appointments. If you go to a business, they're kind of the ones in charge. So if you set up an appointment, they expect you to be there on time. That's power communicated through how all of these different factors are involved when we talk about how time communicates. Okay, hopefully everyone is on board, and I'm not going too fast. I get excited and then I talk fast. I'm from the Midwest, and so we talk fast. All right, so second is the process of communication. So now we have some definitions. Let's talk about the process of communication. So I have a graphic here for you, and this is actually taken, it's called the transactional model of communication, and it's taken from one of my textbooks that I use, an interpersonal textbook. This is meant to depict the process that communication takes when you are, in some sort of interaction conversation. So when you look at this, you have basically two communicators. They're just using two communicators, and each communicator brings their own environment to the interaction. And then there's this exchange of the messages. And then you have noise, which are the little squiggly lines going through the graphic. So let's kind of break all this down. I may have to toggle back and forth a little bit, but let's break this down. So different components. We have the communicators. Those are the participants. Okay, they're sending and receiving the messages, the information. Then we have the exchange of the message. Now, a message is always going to pass through what we call a channel. And a channel is by whatever means the message is transferred. So this could be electronic, so like a text message, an email, through the media, like if you're watching the news. So it can be kind of an electronic channel. It could be face-to-face. So if you're face-to-face with someone, then that would be your channel. You're seeing them, you're hearing them. It could be written, you write someone a card or you send a letter, something like that. So there's just, a lot of different ways that messages can be transferred. So that's kind of the exchange part. And then we have environments. And as I said, if you look back at the graphic, we both bring our own environments to the interaction. But if you notice in the middle, there's a little overlap. So this is the idea that while we have our own environments, we also have the idea of shared experiences, shared backgrounds. We might be sharing a physical location. So an environment can actually be a physical location, like where you are. Like right now, I'm in my dining room. That's a physical location. Okay. We also have cultural background. And cultural background are all of the different identities, all the different pieces of who we are. So it could be any sort of demographic, it could be where we're from, all of the above. And we're going to actually be talking about identity a little bit more in a little bit, but any of those kind of cultural background elements we're bringing to the equation as well. And then of course, all of our experiences. And when we can, I like the meet in the middle part, because when we can find a shared experience, that's where true understanding starts to happen. It's like, I'm an individual, you're an individual, but when we can actually come together and find those connections, those shared experiences, that's really where we start to kind of practice a lot of understanding and empathy, and really can get somewhere with our conversations. So I really like that middle piece. And then of course we have to deal with the noise running through everything. And external noise is everything in our environment. So, I warned everyone or whoever was on here about the possibility of my dog barking in the background. That would be external noise. He's being good right now, fingers crossed, knock on wood, but he can get out of control. And then we have the physiological, which is more of our health and our body kind of getting in the way. So I don't know about you, but if I am sick or have a headache or I'm hungry, like forget about it. I don't want to, it's just a huge distraction. So a lot of those things are within our, getting sleep at night, stuff like that, but they do cause a lot of distractions. So the physiological things can be tricky. And then the psychological, probably one of the trickiest, because psychological would be the more mental, emotional barriers that get in the way. And, this is preconceived notions that we have, or prejudgments, or assumptions, or biases. Maybe we're just preoccupied thinking about something else. It's kind of our mental state and our emotional state that can get in the way of effectively receiving information. So there's definitely a lot going on, but hopefully that makes sense. Again, if you have questions, put it in the chat because I'm more than happy to answer them. Hope I'm not going too fast, but that just gives you an idea of the communication model and kind of the process and all the different elements of that. So let's take a look here. Okay, doing good. So the third element is meeting our needs. This is one of my favorites to talk about because not only do I find it incredibly interesting, but also I think people are really surprised by how much communication plays a role in our lives. Let's start with practical needs. This is pretty straightforward. Practical needs are using communication to satisfy all of those daily needs. Yeah, right? Like the instrumental goals are getting people to behave in ways that we want. So when we talk to our plumber about fixing our pipes, when we talk to the grocer or the person at the deli because we like some thinly sliced turkey, when, all of those things that we do on a daily basis, kind of communicating out of necessity that sometimes we take for granted, that's how communication satisfies these practical needs. It's absolutely essential and unavoidable to do this. So there have been some changes with COVID. And if you want to, again, put in the chat any changes that you have encountered in your practical needs that have changed with COVID, I would love to hear some of the things that you've had to adjust. I know for me personally, I was in quarantine for a while. My husband is a first responder and contracted COVID. He's fine. He actually didn't really have any symptoms. But I was in quarantine for a month. I didn't get to leave my house for a month. And I'm a pretty social person and I was losing my marbles a little bit, but just having to stay distant. I ordered groceries for the first time online. I was so proud of myself. I was like, I'm scared. I've never done this before, but I had to go through and I just had to figure it out. And so that's a practical need. Like my communication had to change because that was the nature of what I had to do at the time, unfortunately. So talking to doctors and, at all sorts of our meetings, all those things, meetings and services and everything are all online, or a lot of them are online now. So definitely a lot of changes occurring due to COVID. So would love to hear about some changes that you've had to make as well. And then we have social needs. Again, another big one that has been impacted significantly with COVID, but we are social beings. We use communication to maintain to initiate them, to get them going. Like that's how we get going with relationships. We use communication. We use it to maintain them. If it's time to terminate, we use communication to terminate them. But it's how we create the positive connections in our life. It gives us a sense of belonging. And I did a little bit of research on this and I was shocked. But I did a little bit of research, and the self-proclaimed happiest people in the world, not just in the US, in the world, are people that have a rich social life. They claim to have a rich social life. And it's interesting to me, the number of close friends. I started doing some research about, and I put resources, by the way, at the end of this, but I started doing some research about, types of relationships and how many that we have. And I found that typically people have about 3 to 5, what they consider on average, 3 to 5 close friends or close relationships in their life. And again, people who rank the highest life satisfaction are in that range, that 3 to 5 close. Now, I'm sure it depends on what you deem close. It's probably has a little bit of wiggle room, but 3 to 5 sounds pretty accurate, at least for me in my life. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. And that was from an article in Psychology Today in August 2019. So fairly recent, 3 to 5. But I'm sure a lot of your relationships have adjusted or changed a little bit for COVID. But yeah, 3 to 5. And then the number kind of goes up for more relationships. It's not uncommon for people to have 7 to 9 in their kind of direct bubble. But the close relationships would be like the people that you could pick up the phone at, 1 a.m. and go, I'm having a crisis, I need you. And they would probably do something to help you. But social needs, hugely, hugely important. And then we also have identity needs. So I had mentioned this kind of in cultural background a little bit. So I put this wheel up here, this graphic, because these are some of certainly not all of them, but these are some of the different aspects of our identity. This is kind of a diversity wheel where we look at some of those key identifiers that really kind of make us who we are and influence our communication, influence our values, our beliefs, our attitudes, our ways of thinking. and then by extension, our behaviors. So we're really kind of looking at all of these different things as part of our identity. However, we don't really know who we are outside of communication. I mean, when you think about it, think about when communication starts for you. So my sister-in-law just had a baby and on January 6th. And it's when, yeah, I know, I'm so excited. I'm sure everyone's like, woohoo, babies. Yeah, they're amazing. She's so cute. But it starts from before she's even born, right? I mean, like, you pick out colors for a nursery, you do maybe a gender reveal, it's like, oh, we need to have pink this or blue this or what. I mean, that's all starting. This communication is all starting to kind of weave this basket that's going to kind of, be this person's identity. And then when they're born, again, it's all about the interactions that they have. We're not actually born with this kind of sense of identity. We're not even really born knowing that we're human. And there's actually been some unfortunate studies to prove this. And I do have a couple quick videos. We're not going to watch the whole video, and fingers crossed this works. Some of you may have heard of Jeannie Wiley. She's a little girl that in the 70s was profoundly abused by her family. And this is kind of her story. I just want to warn you, a little disclaimer. It is talking about child abuse. So it's, keep that in mind for any of you who are not comfortable with that. I don't want this to be a trigger for anyone. But Jeannie's story is pretty profound. So let's see if this works here. And this video, hoping that it loads, yay, is from a documentary that TLC did in 2003. Unfortunately, there's not a ton of information about Jeannie after kind of her childhood period. So we'll just watch like a little clip of this. Let's see if I can make it bigger.
Officials in the Los Angeles suburb of Arcadia have taken custody of a 13-year-old girl, and they say was kept in such isolation by her parents that she never even learned to talk. The girl still wore diapers and was uttering infantile noises. A social worker discovered the case 2 weeks ago. But the authorities are hoping she still may have a normal learning capacity.
Among the first to see the child was Temple City Detective Sergeant Frank Lindley.
I already knew that the child was 13 and a half years old. And I took one look at her, and she wasn't much bigger than my daughter Beverly, who had just turned 7 about 3 months earlier. And I really had a hard time conceiving of the idea that the child was the age that she was. The child obviously had been severely mistreated. She was still in diapers, couldn't walk. She had no verbal skills at all at that point. The last time I was on this street was probably 30 years ago. Yep, there it is. Hasn't changed much. The backyard looks the same. It's all weeds and dead grass. Looks the same as it did in 1970.
The house belonged to Clark Wiley. A loner, Clark had turned his back on the world after his mother had been killed in a hit-and-run accident. After the accident, things in the Wiley house would never be the same again.
The house was completely dark. All the blinds were drawn. There were no toys, no clothes, nothing that would ever indicate to you that a child at any age lived there. The child's bedroom was back in this corner. That was the bedroom. The windows were covered to about 3 inches from the top, which was the only natural light that had ever come in there, and all the time the child was in the bedroom. The entire furnishings of the bedroom consisted of a cage with a pull-down chicken wire lid and some type of piece of wire securing it when they closed it down. There was a potty chair with some kind of homemade strapping device.
For 13 years, Jeannie had spent her nights locked in bed. her days strapped to a potty chair. During that time, Clark had ordered his son John and wife Irene never to talk to her.
Here we go. Okay. Could everyone hear that? Yes, hopefully. I hope everyone could hear that. Let's see here. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Courtney. Okay. So it just breaks my heart. I'm sorry. It's such a downer. Poor little Jeannie, 13 years, no clue who she was, what she was. She couldn't speak. She was physically, we're going to talk about physical needs next. Physically, she was much smaller than she should have been. It's a horrific situation, but it demonstrates that it's absolutely critical that we are communicating effectively with our children, because this really sets them up and creates this foundation for their future. So profoundly abused. And unfortunately, there were a lot of people initially that rallied around Jeannie to try and help her. And they did in a lot of ways, but she was never able to fully recover from her situation. It just, 13 years was just too long. And I won't get into all the psychology behind it, but I'm sure many of you or some of you have heard of critical periods of people's lives. And the theory is that we have these periods where we're supposed to be kind of learning these certain skills. And if we don't do that within those critical periods, it makes it incredibly difficult to learn those skills. So, and language is one of them. And she learned words, but she never really truly was able to embrace the idea holistically of language and how language functions. She just essentially learned a lot of words, which is good. That's progress. But she was never able to fully recover. And then I also have this quick clip, we'll just watch a short one, of a gal named Oksana Malaya. And she's from the Ukraine. And in the 80s, she was also profoundly abused and kind of left out to live with the dogs on her family homestead, and had some consequences because of that. And this is actually taken from a 60 Minutes video that they did, 60 Minutes in Australia.
At first, this looks like some kind of strange hoax. Ukrainian girl Oksana Malaya running, jumping, eating and barking just like a dog. But this is no fraud. Oksana's behaviour is the result of the most cruel childhood neglect that began when she was 3.
Mum had too many kids. We didn't have enough beds, so I crawled to the dog and started living with her.
Her parents were alcoholics, and one night, too drunk to care, they left their infant daughter outside in the cold. Looking for warmth, Oksana crawled into the farm kennel. Curling up with the mongrel dogs probably saved her life.
I would talk to them. They would bark, and I would repeat it. That was our way of communication.
For the next 6 years, from the age of 3 to 8, the kennel was Oksana's home, and the dogs her family.
So I'm going to stop there and just bring this back up. So again, tragic. The one thing that I will say for Oksana that I think essentially saved her life was a shorter period of time. And she did have communication in her life. She did have some communication, but essentially her identity became linked to canines instead of humans. So she kind of, because she was so young and she was in those critical periods of her life, instead of identifying as a human and kind of looking at this diversity wheel, all of these different facets of being human, she became more identified or more aligned with dogs, because that was her family. Those were the people that she was around for 5-6 years of her life, which is horrific. But I think at least having some of that interaction with dogs, because anyone who has a dog, I know Courtney has a dog too, anyone who has a dog knows that they do give you some sense of of communication and belonging and love and affection. It's not the same. We're not going to equate it to humans, but it definitely, it helps to have that. So just a couple kind of tragic stories, but definitely kind of highlighting the importance of communication satisfying identity needs. And then the last need is the physical. And physical is, again, so incredibly important because we have this from, we need this from such an early age. You know, the first thing that doctors do, you know, as long as it's safe to do so, is a mother delivers the baby and they put the baby on the mother's chest, right? They put that again, touch, going back to haptics, it's the touch, because that contact to contact of the skin is so incredibly important. And so that really is that physical importance when we have, you know, the need for people in our lives and the social aspect. If we don't, I put a list here, you know, there's a lot of anxiety for people, a more sedentary lifestyle, it can affect sleep, it can impact weight. And I looked into a couple different things. I researched John McCain. So former Senator John McCain told his story about being a prisoner of war in Vietnam and how the lack of communication affected him physically and mentally. You know, I think he was in captivity for 6 years or something like that. Forgive me. It was around 6 years, I believe. And just, you know, the people would tap on the walls, the prisoners, even though they knew they would get punishment if they were caught, just having that little bit of someone else is out there was enough to kind of keep them going. But, you know, things like solitary confinement, all of those different things have drastic physical effects. People are experiencing physical effects now with COVID. There's been changes that have happened, and I kind of went down a wormhole a little bit, and I had to stop because it was just bumming me out. But there's been a lot of detrimental things that have happened since the start of COVID. But I have a couple interesting things here. I want to get these statistics right, so stay with me. So I looked into the Journal of the American Medical Association, and they were saying that having strong social networks, like strong social ties, people can live on average 3.7 years longer than people who don't have those strong social networks. Socially isolated people, hello, 1 month with just my husband in our house, socially isolated people are 4 times more susceptible to the common cold. Now, I don't know how it's possible, because if you're socially isolated, I don't know where you're getting the common cold, but it does affect your immune system. Lack of relationships jeopardizes coronary health to a degree that can rival things like smoking, cigarette smoking, high blood pressure, obesity, and lack of exercise. This is all coming from the Journal of the American Medical Association. So, you know, everyone's saying sitting is the new smoking. Well, maybe perhaps lack of relationships is the new smoking. Because, I mean, when we're talking about coronary health, and this is feeding, you know, kind of our health in so many ways, it's pretty profound. I was, you know, pretty shocked reading through some of the research that they were finding. So super interesting to me. So we've got all of these needs that are being satisfied. Hopefully that's making sense to everybody. Let's talk about strategies for success. Now, I'm looking at the time here, and I want to make sure we have some time for questions and stuff too. Let's go through these. I just kind of put them all in here, and I linked some resources to these too. So if you want to go and check that out, you certainly can. So some of these tips are to help you kind of just within you, like help yourself kind of cope through maybe some of the stuff that you're dealing with, but other things are also meant to help you in your relationship. So kind of externally as well as internally. And so I'm a huge fan. Some of you might think it's corny, but I'm a huge fan of learning love languages. Gary Chapman's love languages, hugely successful. And there are 5 love languages. It's the words of affirmation, it's quality time, it's acts of service, it's gifts, and it's physical touch. I'm coming back to touch again, but that's a love language. And love languages are all about how we like to receive and express, give and receive love and affection, just how it's communicated to us in a way that resonates with us. Well, I linked a free quiz here. I make my students in the interpersonal class take a love language quiz. It's free online, and they have one for kids. They have one if you're in a relationship. They have one if you're unattached. There's just some different options, and you can take them all if you want to. But I will tell you, I think love languages saved the relationship with my husband early on when we first started dating, because we were speaking two very different languages. He is an acts of service person, and I'm more of a words and quality time kind of person. And what was happening was, because he was showing his affection in a way that was not resonating with me, I was just like, right over my head it went. We were struggling a little bit. We were having some misunderstandings. I was like, so we both, he's my guinea pig when it comes to certain things. I make him like, if I'm going to teach my students about this, you're doing it too, Buster. So we sit down and we do these things together. And I was like, oh, it all makes sense now. It all makes like, oh, when you were doing that, it actually meant that you were showing you care about me. And you feel like so dense because this is your area of study, and yet it can easily go over your head as well. So I definitely recommend the love language quizzes for sure. Very helpful. And I love this article about, another tip is practicing empathy. I'm going to bring this article up because I'm not going to scan through the whole thing, but I absolutely, oh shoot, what did I just do? I love this article. It's from the New York Times. It's about living a year of better living. And there's so many helpful tips, folks. It's, talking to new people. So part of practicing empathy, step one, talking to new people and, putting yourself in other people's shoes, like trying out somebody else's life. They give you little quizzes that you can take in here as well, which I love, starting a community garden because we're joining forces for a shared cause. It's, standing up for others, admitting bias in our life, is not a bad thing. Admitting bias is not a bad thing. We all have biases. So, being able to overcome some of those things, but honesty with yourself, so you can take this little quiz about implicit bias, which is super beneficial. I also have my students take an implicit bias quiz, and they're always surprised at their results. And I always take it too, because I think it's important. There's another quiz on checking your privilege. And, talking about privilege is probably a conversation for another time, but, these are all really helpful tips. Talking to people, not being afraid to have those difficult conversations. But this entire article is one of the things that I really want to focus on with the standing up for others is the amplifying other voices, because it's not all about you. Sometimes the hardest thing is being able to take a step back and saying, wow, I've shared enough today. People have heard my voice a lot. Perhaps I should ask other people what they think about something. It's definitely a skill that you have to kind of teach people. It's something that has to be brought to their attention from time to time, because there are some people who just naturally like to voice their ideas, and other people who kind of like to sit back and just take it all in and listen. But oftentimes it can also just be that no one asked them to share their voice, and they have to be asked. So amplifying other people's voices, love it. It's just reading books, reading to your children, starting kids young. The list goes on, and they have so many helpful resources linked into this article as well, which I love. So having hard conversations. One of my favorite things to say to my students when we're talking about difficult subjects is to get comfortable being uncomfortable. We have to be able to have hard conversations, and we have to be able to do it civilly. One of my rules anytime in online discussions and classroom discussions is civility. You listen, you have to listen. So, reading, expanding, researching, and then of course, starting people young with the raising empathetic kids. It's such a great article. I strongly recommend it. Kind of just showing you some of the highlights here, but the connections that they make in here and the resources that they use are quite good. So check it out if you have a chance to do so, but all incredibly important. Listening to understand. I'm not going to bring up this Harvard Business Review article. I do recommend checking it out though, if you have, again, access to these resources at the end, but it's talking about the importance of sometimes we're just too quick to respond, or we cut people off, we interrupt instead of just sitting back and taking it all in. And then this article talks about ways that we can listen better, some helpful tips, things like, making it so that you are taking notes on something or jotting down some key ideas, or again, trying to practice more empathy, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. So there's a lot of different tips that they offer for listening to understand. I like to ask questions the way that I understand if I'm confused about something, and making sure that I'm listening and not just like going through the motions and being like, nod, the bobblehead nodding along, is to ask questions, be engaged, be involved. That helps me a lot. I'm going to show you a quick video on perception checking as well. I think time-wise we're doing okay, but perception checking is a quick process that you can use to not jump to conclusions. I don't know about you, but sometimes I get a little ahead of myself. And if I see someone behaving in a certain way, it's really easy for me to kind of be like, what's wrong with you? And this is a quick way to avoid doing that. So here's a quick video that's kind of cute.
Does this ever happen to you? You always leave trash in your car. Why are you such a slob?
Why are you avoiding me? I waved at you and you totally turned the other way like you're avoiding me.
Did you really mean those things you said last night? Or were you just trying to embarrass the both of us?
If you get frustrated by someone's actions, here's our tip to help you get to the bottom of someone's behavior that might bug you.
Sometimes when we're trying to connect with other people, we jump to conclusions about their behavior.
Making assumptions about another person's motivations can lead to tension and unnecessary arguments.
So, if you want to talk to somebody about something they did that bothered you, try a perception check.
A perception check is a simple 3-step process that identifies a behavior and creates an opportunity to talk about it in a meaningful way. Here's what it looks like.
So I noticed you've been checking your phone the whole time we've been here. Is something going on at work, or are you expecting to hear from someone? What's going on?
Now let's break that down. First, describe their behavior in neutral language.
So I've noticed you've been leaving your leftovers from lunch in the car and, not bringing them into the house or throwing them away.
Hey, I waved to you in the park and you turned away without waving back.
You seem to have a lot to say tonight.
Second, offer 2 possible explanations for their behavior.
Have you had your hands full with other things, or maybe just forgetting?
Did you not see me, or were you on the phone?
Is there something on your mind? Or does the trial have you too distracted? And third, ask for some feedback.
What's going on?
So, what's going on?
Okay, so we'll stop there. This third one just kills me. It's the music and everything. It's so ominous. Like, what's happening? But it's kind of a silly little video, but I promise you the skill works, folks. I have used this many times in my own life, where if someone feels attacked, they're automatically going to put up a barrier. They're going to go, whoa, defense mode, stop attacking me. But if you approach it with a perception check and go, hey, I noticed X, Y, and Z. What, is this happening? Is this happening? What's going on? It takes 2 seconds and you've got this perception check. And it can be the whole big change that you need to avoid jumping to conclusions, because what it does is it allows them to fill in the blanks where in your perception, you don't have all of the information. So it allows them to give you the information that maybe you don't have to make a better informed decision or have a better conversation. So it's wonderful. So last 4 here, love the idea of focusing on self-care. Self-care has been hugely important for years now, but it's becoming even more important with COVID. I love the idea. There's a 12 ways to self-care article. It covers, of course, great, things like sleeping and eating right and exercising and stuff like that. I like the idea of self-awareness because you have to know what you need in order to be able to make changes in your life. And I also believe in self-awareness because communication really starts and ends with us. And you have to be mindful of what you're putting out into the universe, right? Because what you're putting out into the universe, you're going to be getting back. It's like, if you approach someone with a particular mindset or a particular way, you shouldn't be surprised when you're kind of met with maybe the same energy or the same type of communication. Some people zig when other people zag, but sometimes they kind of meet you where you are. So be mindful of what you're putting out there, please. That self-awareness is huge. Love this article about ways to help. Helping others can be hugely important for effective communication. It makes you feel better about yourself. I linked to Washington State's website on how you can help. It shows you places you can donate or volunteer. Doing wellness checks with neighbors. Love that one. I have older neighbors who have basically been cooped up the entire time that we've been dealing with COVID. Because they're an at-risk population, and I check on them probably more than they want me to. But every couple days, I'm like, hey, just checking in, and it's more for my sanity as well as theirs because I miss talking to them, I miss seeing them. So doing wellness checks. Love that they give you some examples of places that you can volunteer. And again, you have to do what's safe and logical for you. Donating blood, supporting food banks. This is straight from basically Washington.gov. So great resources there for anyone who wants to, just be more mindful of helping others. Then we have Reappraisal, which simply is just trying to rethink things that are kind of emotionally charged and can be really negative. I tend to ruminate or dwell on things that don't go my way from time to time. Hopefully I'm not the only one, but I do that from time to time. So just reframing, it's kind of that whole mindset of, taking a lemon and making lemonade with it. It's, something bad happens. And instead of saying, oh my gosh, my world is coming to an end because this happened, maybe think of it, have your moment, have your feelings, obviously, but take a moment to really think about what could come of it, like what positive things could come of it. And that's kind of the idea of reappraisal. And then the last one is to innovate. And this is probably my favorite one. Innovation, thinking outside what quote unquote normal means. I have been in awe of the innovation that has come out of this pandemic. I am in awe of my colleagues. They are amazing. I am in awe of my students and my community. And people have really said, like, okay, I can't do business this way anymore. Well, guess what? I'm going to do business this way now. It's just, I'm shocked and so happy that people have been able to innovate. That doesn't mean that people aren't still struggling, but if we can innovate, if we can, kind of think outside the norm, we can still have effective communication. We just are going to communicate in a different way. So I love that. Keep innovating, keep doing what you need to do to fill your cup, because that's what we have to do right now. It's, it is what it is. So with that, I think I left a couple minutes for questions. I do have my resources page too. I've linked everything there. But if you have questions, Courtney, I'm all ears. Hopefully I didn't go too fast and confuse everyone.
All right, thank you so much. First up, yes, we do have a question coming in the Q&A. Sean wants to know, can practicing active listening help in having a conversation through communication?
Yes. Communication is a two-way street. It's a two-way street. So you can't really have communication without the listening. It's the sending and receiving. So you send, but you got to receive as well. So active listening is essential. That's how we participate in communication effectively, 100%.
Yeah, I would say I definitely agree with that. And teaching through Zoom this last year has really taught me the challenge of not being able to, see faces or see what the reaction of what I'm saying is. And, when you said that the nonverbal side is, 65% or more, that I was like, that can't be. And then like, oh, maybe it is. That really hit home for me.
Yes, through the mediated forms of communication, we can't see people's expressions. And the two primary ways that humans interpret emotion is through facial expressions and tone.
Mhm.
So if we can't hear tone and we can't see facial expressions, thank goodness for emojis, right? I mean, goodness.
Good point. Where would I be without my animated GIFs? Well, thank you very much for joining us. And Stefanie, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Audience members, really appreciate you coming and sharing in this experience. And please join us again next week. We will have a recording of this up on the LCC Community Conversations website and the LCC YouTube channel as soon as we get it edited and uploaded. And please come back again next Thursday at 12. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.